there was a really interesting alignment of shared values around decentralization and what would an economy and society look like if we started to imagine what if we decentralized the food system of supply and demand and production and consumption? What if we decentralized the energy system? And along with kind of that line of thinking, like how do we create an economy where the kind of power devolves back into the individual and community? Really, blockchain and cryptocurrency fits.
And hello again, denizens of the cryptoverse and more. I have the fantastic pleasure today of speaking with David Casey, the co-founder of NuMundo. And how's it going, David?
Hi, good morning, Joel. Thank you for taking the call today and for your time. Excited to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that's going to be a little bit of a surprise to a lot of viewers. I don't know how familiar they are in this scene. So could you just give me the quick rundown, like what NuMundo is?
Yeah, so NuMundo is an Airbnb style platform and network. We have 800 locations around the world in 100 countries. And these locations are pretty diverse in their nature. They include retreat centers, off-grid communities and eco-villages, permaculture and organic farms, ashrams, some kind of rainforest conservation centers. They're pretty diverse, but what they all kind of are bound together by is a value set that really has at the core of it, what is the good life? How do we create a life for ourselves as human beings that is makes us happy, and we can live happily as individuals and as communities, and with the community of all life and animals, etc. So what we kind of really is at the core of our philosophy is what could life look like in the future if we could design it ourselves from scratch. So another way to think about NuMundo is it's a lot of experiments in what the future of living could look like, usually outside of cities.
So it's like the test kitchen for what we hope to be the world of the future if we play our cards right.
Yeah, and it's, there's many different versions of it, I think, and there are going to be many different versions of the future, and I think that's part of the fun, is experimenting and seeing like what can we create with a blank slate, which again is much easier to do outside of cities, and especially in countries that have kind of more freedom to create.
Yeah, how did you get on board of this idea? It seems like it's not like you just get out of college, you sort of look at the list of jobs out there and be like, oh, this sounds good, I'll just do this. It's like all the cool kids are making one of these. It seems like it took a little bit of independent thought on there. So why did you see this as a priority, that the world actually absolutely needed a service like this?
Yeah, so I went to school for something called the Political Economy of Industrial Societies, or Industrial Economic Development, and really like delve deep into what is the function of the World Bank, the International Monetary Funds, the US State Department, how do US-China relations work, et cetera. And essentially, how do we get from a non-industrialized country to an industrialized country? And then I became a little bit disillusioned because I started traveling a lot and then noticing these contrasts where I would go into a kind of impoverished Latin American country, live in a small village for a few weeks, and just notice people were kind of carefree, happy, supporting each other as families. And then I'd go back into my own country. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, which I now endearingly call the high-tech ghetto. And I would notice like, drug addiction, suicide, high rates of depression, murder, these kinds of indicators that something was not well. And so then I started to question, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing with this like economic industrialization that prioritizes material wealth, but at the cost of seemingly so many other things, including, the environment, the water supply, the air quality, et cetera. And so I just started kind of really questioning what was the point of industrial development, and is there another form of so-called economic development that takes more into account actual human needs and human well-being.
Yeah, so it seems like what has happened is with industrialization, people have increased efficiency of production in terms of like raw amounts. Like we can build more, have more vehicles, have more food that provides more calories, all that kind of stuff. But there's been a little bit of a possible misalignment. And so, is it fair to say you're sort of trying to educate people to reorder their priorities to where instead of the luxury that once you've basically you're not starving to death anymore because a lot of people are at that point, to be fair, once you're past that and you instead of starting to build, I want a bigger house, to be like, I want a house with that's more walkable, and it might be smaller, more walkable, more light, in a cleaner air environment. Or instead of, oh, I just now I have like a bunch of money for food, like I just like having a super expensive liquor cabinet. Instead of that, like I'm going to spend more on food to where I'm actually healthier and happier, and I feel better about where it came from, etc. So it's kind of a, now that we got all these resources, it's kind of an educational mission to reorder that, to help people understand to reorder that, so we actually get objectively more out of life and not just numbers on a balance sheet. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say it's about quality of life and about kind of this instant gratification versus what is actually the decision that will make me happier in the long run, or healthier, or closer to the life I actually want to live. There was something that came out of, I think, Bhutan a little while ago called the Gross National Happiness Index, something like that,
Oh yes,
where
I've
they
actually
start
read about that.
yeah, where they started looking at other indicators, and we're like, okay, let's make an economic development policy that actually prioritizes things other than just material wealth, and address some of these concerns that are rampant in the West, like I mentioned, suicide, drug addiction, depression, etc.
Yeah, so where does cryptocurrency fit in all this? Because I mean, obviously you guys take Dash now, which is fantastic, but it was not the beginning. As much as I'd like to say I went and talked to you guys and just said you need to be on this financial revolution. Oh, I had no idea, and you just got your minds blown. You're kind of already familiar with the whole cryptocurrency thing. So first, how did you find out about it? And then second, how did you decide, how and why did you decide to make it a big part of this movement?
Yeah, so in terms of really, I've been interested in alternative currencies and community currencies since I was studying in economics in university, let's say 15 years ago. And I had been looking at different kind of currency experiments around the world, and always been fascinated by kind of different ways that people transact in a peer-to-peer way that is just direct. And
So like
different
barter and trade and things like that.
yeah, and also like what kinds of value, what kinds of means of exchange of value can we create on a community scale, or between communities, that's not necessarily beholden to a centralized central bank, or government that has its own agenda, has its own interests that are different from that local community, and therefore may be extracting value either directly or indirectly to fund things that are not necessarily aligned with the economy of that local community. And so I heard about blockchain and cryptocurrency probably first, actually, while I was living in super remote area of Guatemala, like maybe 6 years ago. And I didn't think too much of it. I met this like traveling anarchist dude who was like, yeah, there's this new currency. It's called Bitcoin, and it's allowing me to, just live outside the financial system. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, and then I started hearing about it more and more. I met the founders of a project that is now called Holochain about a year after that, and that they started really blowing my mind. And then I heard about Ethereum, and I was like, okay, this is probably like the seeds of another financial system. And then I started meeting more and more people from the community, from the blockchain community, and finding that there was a really interesting alignment of shared values around decentralization and what would an economy and society look like if we started to imagine what if we decentralize the food system of supply and demand and production and consumption? What if we decentralize the energy system? And along with kind of that line of thinking, like how do we create an economy where the kind of power devolves back into the individual and community? Really, blockchain and cryptocurrency fits, and especially like the other applications of blockchain outside of cryptocurrency really fit into that vision. Like what would it look like if we started implementing governance systems using blockchain to govern our community finances, for example, whether or not those are cryptocurrencies or whatever. And I think for me, Dash is super interesting because I've been studying your governance system for a while, and it's definitely one of the most interesting ones I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's very interesting to me because that's kind of how I live. I don't have a boss. We just kind of ask a decentralized network that anyone can kind of plug into for money to increase the interest of that communal network. And if we convince them to do it, then we just literally get money from the sky every month. Like it gets freshly minted and just there you go, right there. No one can stop it. And it's been a very trip of a of a world, but it does sometimes you're too close to the forest to see the trees, or too far, whatever the expression is. And sometimes I sort of don't take a step back and look at the whole, how does this fit into the greater good of humankind? How does this change the world? Like I'm just, I got a budget proposal on, I got to make sure to do this in time. And sometimes I forget to just look out and just say, wow, how much of the world could this absolutely revolutionize if it actually worked that way? And one thing I think is interesting about cryptocurrency, a little side note, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed a lot of this has brought me together with a lot of different people more than anything else previously. I've been in all kinds of worlds where, martial art world and some just the political freedom mindset world, which is, to be fair, much more diverse now than it used to be. But cryptocurrency seems to be that one shared value kind of thing where everyone shares some core values on how the world should work and how we should behave and treat each other. Yet people's interpretations or how they got from there are just radically different, just completely different. I don't know if you've experienced the same sort of thing as well.
Yeah, definitely one of the things that attracted me to the blockchain community was the diversity of thought and the quality of conversations with people that I was meeting. And I was like, wow, I feel like somehow this is a community I have a lot of affinity with, even if it was people with, some radically different political views. It would just be really fascinating to speak the same language of like basically political economy, and talking about the kind of the Dash masternode governance structure. One of the things that we'd like to do with NuMundo in the future is explore how we can implement some kind of similar structure of like a decentralized network of stakeholders that are working together to make decisions in the common interest of the network. And that's another reason that I'm so fascinated with blockchain. And I really look forward to connecting with the Dash community more, having them come into our network and share ideas and learnings from the Dash network and how it's been built.
Now, have you seen any kind of the opposite of this in the crypto space? So mostly, as you just talked about, in my experience, it seems like yours as well, we've run into lots and lots of people who think very differently, but about very much the same about what actually matters. Now, on the other hand, I see out on the internets out there's a bunch of people who think you need to run your own node, eat steak all the time, and wear a certain hat. And then that's just what you do for Bitcoin. That's kind of like everyone has to do. Everything else is a shit coin. Or you got a hodl. Just that very narrow mindset. Have you intersected with that narrow crypto mindset at all, or is that just kind of something you hear about in legend and just you never actually bump into?
Yeah, so I think you might be talking about the Bitcoin maximalists.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I did have a pretty interesting encounter with kind of a good amount of them at Anarchapulco in Mexico, where I actually met some awesome Dash people there too. The Dash bus was there.
Oh, interesting.
And that was actually my first real, because I'm much more familiar with the Ethereum community, which I think of as like utopian nerd programmers. Just like a really different vibe, you know. And yeah, but there's all sorts of people in the blockchain and crypto community, and I think that's what makes it interesting is people are coming at it from different angles, and people have different views, and I think diversity is super healthy because it will create a stronger ecosystem.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about cryptocurrencies and changing the world, everyone involved loves to talk about those aspects. Now we have a extremely speculative space, almost 10 years in. There's a lot of infrastructure and money and stuff like that all around. How does this work for ideas of the future? How does this work for it'll be worth more someday? Not how is it being used today? And even in Dash, which is extremely focused on people buying their coffee with it today, which, I mean, I did that yesterday. I haven't been out of the house today, but do you think that's a sign? Do you think that's a sign that cryptocurrency is maybe overhyped and not going anywhere? Or is it a sign that it's just still being formed, yet the massive amount of speculative interest means, wow, we're onto something huge for humankind?
Yeah, there's a couple aspects of this. One of them, and I've been having this conversation more and more, is to start separating blockchain technology from speculative cryptocurrencies, because there's a lot of interesting real world applications of blockchain technology, including like supply chain logistics, counterfeit products, pharmaceutical, medical records, accounting, keeping government budgets transparent. There's so many applications of blockchain that actually don't necessarily need a cryptocurrency on top of them. They can be used as an incentive, but it isn't necessary. And the actual industry of blockchain technology, I see advancing pretty rapidly, including in very centralized areas such as JP Morgan, the Chinese government, etc. They're working on blockchain in completely different ways than the folks like ourselves who endorse decentralized public blockchains. So I think the industry is advancing rapidly. I think the advent of the stablecoin was huge because a lot of merchants I know were always like, that's cool, David, but I don't want to accept a currency that goes down 10% in value, because then how am I going to purchase food for the guests that you're sending to me? If the currency is worth only 90%. So once, I started telling people, there's something called a stable coin now, that was a big thing that was missing. And so I think that is going to be definitely something that will help drive adoption of cryptocurrencies to merchants, because they can rely on the value of it the next day. I also think that with mobile, emerging markets, let's take Africa, in the next few years, millions of Africans are going to have cell phones. A lot of these citizens are unbanked. And so cryptocurrency will be this perfect nexus of crypto plus mobile, will allow entire countries to leapfrog the modern banking system. And I think those will be the places where crypto will truly take off and establish a foothold as kind of a mainstream part of the financial infrastructure before, places like the United States.
Let's play a little bit of haters advocate, because it's always a fun game. You're trying to change the world. What about when people try to say, oh, well, crypto's a tool for just rich, spoiled tech bros to just try to get rich off of other dumber, rich, spoiled tech bros, and you're just using it to play fun hippie for a while before going back to your padded corporate gigs, and the world's not going to change. How do you see that whole ridiculous statement is totally wrong?
Yeah, so I think there is a hero of mine, Buckminster Fuller, and he really said something that stuck with me, which is, when you want to change the system, just build a new one that makes the old one obsolete.
Of course.
And once the new one is, up and running, people will kind of voluntarily and naturally migrate over to it. And so yes, there is like that component of exactly what you described in speculative markets, and I think that's just an immature and young market, and there is a lot of manipulation, and there isn't the same kind of regulation you have in normal financial markets. So there's a ton of manipulation and fake news and all sorts of stuff. And I was reading about like North Korean hacking, like government hackers, like hacking exchanges the other day. So I mean, it's a pretty crazy, unregulated space right now. But I think that truly, like getting beyond the like speculative value of a currency, which I always tell people that I'm sharing about this technology with, like ignore the price of Bitcoin. Like that is not like the important thing here to understand this technology. Like it's a revolutionary technology that allows human beings to transact in a peer-to-peer way and govern our financial system through open protocols in a way that we've never been able to do before. And that's just the beginning, right? Like, I think cryptocurrency is like just like the first killer use case of blockchain. And there's so many more coming that we can't even imagine yet. And I think that's what makes people so excited, and what makes the space get overhyped is because of the potential of the technology.
So people like myself might exist in an isolated little Dash island where I'm just able to live off of it entirely and just kind of play future person. And there's some areas in the world that have high enough levels of adoption where that's actually semi-possible. Is it possible to just go through the NuMundo system, stay at a few centers, go around, experience everything, and just do it entirely off of Dash?
Yes. Yeah. So what we've done is we've integrated a payment system with 6 major cryptocurrencies, including Dash, where folks can travel through our network. We have locations in 100 countries, and you can essentially spend your Dash, and you prepay, and you go to these places, and your food is covered, your room is covered, often instruction, yoga, meditation, whatever. And basically your expenses are covered. And I understand there are other services where you can purchase flights, et cetera, using Dash and other cryptocurrencies. So you could hypothetically combine those different services together and create a trip where you are just using Dash.
Fantastic. That's part of the bit greater. One thing that people are sort of looking for in the adoption strategy right now, just trying to get every single merchant out there to take it, is a little bit of an uphill battle. What it tends to be is people find little islands of use of, I can save a lot of money doing this, or I can do this way better. And then you sort of connect those pillars together, and then you end up having a flippening, as it were, from an old system to the new system. So essentially, if people can go to these centers, prepay everything with Dash, they kind of live off of it, and then they're kind of stuck in the little island thing as if they want to be completely free until, say, now you have some local Dash merchants or other services to sort of combine. So now you might just say, I'm going to do this Dash only vacation, and then you start to venture out a little bit into the rest of the back to the real world, and still stay on that bubble. And eventually those bubbles kind of connect until the whole world is one big bubble, i.e. not a bubble.
And that's actually part of our kind of theory of change with NuMundo, is like, lighting up this network of thousands of centers around the world that are experimenting with a different way of living, bringing people into those little bubbles and allowing them to experience what life could possibly be like in many different ways, and really looking at what would life be like if in like a fully decentralized way, in the sense of like local control of our own food supply, of our own energy supply, et cetera. And, sharing that way of being, and also the educational tools that would allow us to actually implement physically what I call a decentralized political economy. So like, how do we actually create distributed renewable energy grids? How do we create local food systems that are, not relying on large centralized agriculture, for example, and connecting all those bubbles together to the point where, they keep expanding and make one big bubble, so to speak.
Well, fantastic. This has been quite the enlightening chat. Thanks again for sharing your early morning with me. And yeah, well, hopefully we get a whole lot of feedback and excitement over this.
Yeah, one of the things I'm really passionate about, and one of the things I'm here on this planet for some reason, is connecting together the blockchain and cryptocurrency tech community with the off-grid living community and the wellness community, so to speak, yoga, meditation, etc. Because I think a lot can be learned at the intersection of those two communities. We have a lot to teach each other, and I'm kind of a part of both. So that's like, for one reason or another, that's like part of what I'm doing here.
Well, excellent. There couldn't be a better nexus of good intentions and a beautiful future being built.
Thank you. And thank you for having me in beautiful work.